So when I was looking at how companies are reacting to this year, I saw a couple of things, and I saw some differences between large companies and small companies. The large companies are managing the economic downturn by really being cautious. They're hiring fewer contractors, they're reducing overtime, and they're focusing just their critical programs. Smaller companies have other things to worry about, like building a product. And their concerns are a little different. One of the things they're concerned about is the cost of funding this year.
Welcome to Talking TA with Top Source Talent, the podcast that brings you the latest insights, strategies, and trends in talent acquisition. Hosted by Denise Chaffin, president of Top Source Talent with over 30 years of experience in the industry. This podcast features top industry experts, HR professionals, recruiters, and talent acquisition leaders who will share their experiences and knowledge on how to attract and retain top talent. With topics ranging from employer branding to candidate experience, and from diversity, equity, and inclusion to the latest technologies and tools used in talent acquisition, Talking TA with Top Source Talent offers practical tips and advice that you can use to improve your recruitment processes and succeed in today's competitive job market. Whether you're a hiring manager, recruiter, or just interested in the world of talent acquisition, this podcast is for you. Join Denise and her guests as they explore the exciting and dynamic world of talent acquisition, only on Talking TA with Top Source Talent.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talking TA with Top Source Talent. I'm Denise Chaffin, and I'm here with Nancy Schempf, president of Russell Solutions Group. Our discussion today was supposed to be on who's controlling the labor market, the employer or the employee in 2023. But from what we have found is that 2023 is actually an unprecedented year. And during our research, it became very evident to us that the macroeconomic environment is really what's controlling the labor market currently. So our discussion today is going to be more around how employees and employers are reacting to this current labor or this current environment. For Nancy and I, our focus has been on technology and healthcare, but our observations for this podcast are more consistent across multiple industries. And Nancy, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Denise, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. The research has been fun, and the discussions coming up to this have been fun. And the data is really interesting, so I'm looking forward to diving into it. My name's Nancy Schempf. I am the owner of Russell Solutions Group. We are a professional placement staffing firm focused on engineering in the medical device industry. I've been in this business since 2019, and prior to that, I was in industry leading engineering recruiting across one of the largest medical device companies in the world. 25 years of recruiting total and in multiple industries, but focused now on medical device. So, Denise, I think you wanted to start to talk about the employees and how they're reacting to this crazy macroeconomic environment.
Yes, definitely. Yes, well, when I was doing my research, I really expected the employees to have a much bigger pitch, if you would, for this year on the labor market. But as it turns out, I think employees are being very reflective. There's a lot of news feeds come in, for example, through LinkedIn. I think that we all get them, right? People who are impacted by these tremendous layoffs that have been going on since about November of 2022 now. And these people are talking about how they prioritizing their focus for their careers. One of the things that continues to be really upfront and a key topic is flexibility. During the pandemic, people were moving home. They were creating a more flexible work life for themselves. Some still working on site, some not, but a lot more remote and hybrid work came out of the pandemic. So people are continuing to drive for flexibility as a priority for their careers. Not only that, but, Nancy, you and I talked about yesterday, people purchase real estate in remote locations. So with that, if they're forced to move back into the office, what's that going to do to the real estate market?
Not only the real estate market, but the employees. So since people have now spread their wings, so to speak, to other markets to live, these boutique markets like Boise, Austin's a huge one that has surged, Florida, the cost of housing in those areas has increased exponentially. So if we're asking them to go back to work, go back to the office, wherever that may be, they may be forced to sell their house and try to find one somewhere else. We already know that since the pandemic, the housing bust is related to, first, a shortage of housing altogether. I talked to somebody last week who was needed to relocate to Southern California, and he made 17 offers in 2022 on $1.7 million houses and got them all turned down. So this is a huge issue when you're trying to go into a market and not able to find housing. Now with the increased cost of housing, you're going to have to pay more for the house that you have if you're going to stay at the same level. And housing prices are only going up. They haven't gone down yet. Until we see the housing market bubble and the value of homes decrease, it's going to be really hard for people to go back to the office.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very good point. Yeah, so there's a lot of underlying factors here that's going to drive flexibility for employees and this continued path, if you will, forward, for hybrid or remote opportunities. I think also, too, people want to control who they work for. People are still actively pursuing new positions, even with the layoffs we're experiencing. People are, again, being very reflective. They want to advance their careers. One thing that you had brought up yesterday when we were researching, we were talking about the benefits to employees right now with respect to companies laying off. People then are able to move around in their careers. They're able to move from industry to industry. You brought up some really great opportunities that companies now are presenting to employees to help them advance their careers and to help them get into more, what did you call them? Rotational programs, I guess they are, right?
Oh, are you talking about the returnship?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're talking about the returnship. So I think companies, let's just get into it. Companies, especially the larger companies, are offering programs in partnership with SWE and another company called ReachHire. And SWE and ReachHire have joined together to help women who have female engineers in particular, to help female engineers who've left the workforce get back to work with a gap in their resume through a professional internship type program, which means that they can test drive a company. The company can test drive them for, at Medtronic, we did it for 6 months, but it could be 3 months, 6 months, see if it's a fit, and then move into a full-time job. That helps the employees who want to make sure that they're in the industry and in the job that they want. It also helps the companies with a lower cost of hire initially before they find out, A, whether or not they want to hire the person, and B, whether or not they're going to move forward with the project with this person on it. So it's a great win-win for not only the employees, but the employers.
Exactly. And that, we talked about having some synergy, I guess, between the two and moving past this particular post-COVID boom, as they're calling it. And as we kind of, grow out of it over the next year or so, from what I'm hearing from several employers, is that they're expecting things to pick back up this summer, but not really take off again until about this time in 2024. So we may be looking still at, a flatter job market for the next year, even though there will be some increases and there will be some leveling. I think one of the things I'm hearing a lot about too are employers are very careful about the employees that they're retaining, people that they're bringing on, and same thing, that employees in turn, they want stability. They're looking for stability. They want to work for future and current employers who are going to offer them, better work conditions, promotability. They want control of their own future. So I think there is a lot of synergy between what's going on right now with the employees and the employers. Yeah. And one more note too, that's of equal importance, paramount importance, is compensation and salaries. Last year we saw people earning salaries that I talk about unprecedented. I mean, just in the talent acquisition business alone, I have never in 35 years of recruiting seen salaries last year for recruiters as high as I saw them last year. And it is amazing to see the adjustment this year. So, people, and that's just talent acquisition, I'm sure that translates across multiple industries. People want to be paid fairly.
I think what we saw in the data was that in 2021, there was a 7% increase in salaries. 2022, there was an 8% increase in salaries. Over the last 3 years, 2021 and 22, we were at a 20% increase in salaries from 2019. And now in 2023, we're seeing that level off a little bit, and there's only a 3% increase in salaries. So there was this huge jump in pay across all industries, all employees. I mean, even at the entry level, right?
Now, that is for the biospace or the life sciences industry, correct?
That data was based on the life sciences industry, but if you look at the minimum wage,
yes,
and where that went from 2019 to 2023, we're seeing consistent growth even at the lowest level.
Even now.
2023 is leveling off it dropped to 3%.
Oh, it's right, at 3%. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, wages and salaries increased 5.1% for the 12-month period ending in March of 2023 and increased 5% in March of 2022. So the cost of benefits and salaries is still going up. Even as we are ending first quarter of this year, salaries are still higher, but to your point, though, they are leveling off to some degree, according to this chart here that I'm seeing. But people are wanting to be paid fairly, regardless. They don't want, especially with the recent increase in cost of living, I think employees are looking for their employers to offset, salaries and compensation to include cost of living increases. Cost of goods, of course, has driven up inflation considerably. So that's a consideration. People also want, minimized impact, right, for themselves and their families, especially for in terms of compensation and benefits that they're receiving.
Yeah. And, I think that's an issue for companies. In years past, regional pay has been pretty well-defined, where some markets, such as the San Francisco Bay Area and New York, obviously it's a higher cost of living and people are paid more. Now that so many employees who may have lived in those regions in the past they could live in Ohio, or they could live in Idaho, or wherever they want to live, right? And so it's driven up the cost of housing in the regions that normally have a much lower cost of living. And the companies really have to be cognizant and forward thinking about, are we paying people the right amount due to their cost of living now versus what their cost of living would have been 4 years ago? It's a big issue with companies. I also imagine that the unemployment cost to companies has risen exponentially.
Oh, yeah.
With all of the layoffs in 2020.
Yeah.
And now catching up on the layoffs now, where companies could be just drowning in expenses where they weren't before. That's why we might see these cuts in salaries that we were talking about at the CEO and the executive leadership position, just to keep their profit margins in the right spot.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting you say that, because I know that, we have employees in various states, and if as a result of the downturn in November, we had to cut some of our staff, recruiting staff. And getting the letters from the different states was very interesting, because they're adjusting, our rate for unemployment insurance, and our rate gets adjusted up. So I can only imagine what it's like for larger corporations who are employing thousands of people in various states and how it's impacting their unemployment rates for their companies.
Now let's talk a little bit about layoffs, because we haven't really dove into this yet. And this is really interesting. So we're seeing unprecedented layoffs this year from January to the end of April. In the technology industry alone, there's been over 100,000 layoffs, 270,000 across all industries. So technology is about a third of that. We have not seen this since 2001, 2002, with the rise in hiring in the dot-com era and the bubble in the 2001, 2002 era. So CNN wrote a really great article on this, really highlighting who's laying off for what reasons.
Right.
But given all that's happened, we took a look at all of the different industries and how they were impacted by COVID, and sort of the rate in which they were coming back. The first one to come back was healthcare. So people who had non-urgent surgeries put those off. So as soon as they could take their masks off, people were rushing back to the hospital to take care of everything they needed to take care of that they had put off. Manufacturing was another one that came back quickly. Logistics was third. But given some of the impacts in logistics and in manufacturing and in the change in hiring practices across the U.S., companies really rushed to hire a lot of people and then had to say, wait a minute, this was a bubble. This wasn't a continuous growth. And so now we're seeing all companies adjust and focus back on their critical projects, going back to their core offerings and trying to regain footing on their profitability.
Yeah, I was going to say that article that you're talking about, the layoff report, I had highlighted some of the notes that some of the executives made, like Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, Microsoft, Salesforce, Zoom, Yahoo, and then also Indeed. And there was an interesting post on Indeed here. But a lot of these companies, though, had gone on these giant hiring ramps and hiring frenzies, right? During the pandemic. And so they are the companies now that are citing uncertain economic conditions that are predicating these huge layoffs.
Yeah.
And how they want to be more cognizant and more sensitive, if you will, especially for their employees. I mean, look at all the lives that are impacted when you have to lay that many people off.
Right.
It's just really interesting. Indeed, the company that is the job listing company, they announced cuts of approximately 2,200 employees,
wow,
which is about 15% of their company. But the decision to make those job cuts was interesting. So the CEO of the company, he said that, because of the recent post-COVID boom, he said they see the market continuing to cool down. And so they had to, cut back on their staff as well, because he anticipates that job listings, which are the company's bread and butter, will continue to decline in fiscal years 2023 and 2024.
Yeah.
Which is another interesting point. When we talk about moving people around and hiring and layoffs and whatnot, there's going to be a lot of internal movement, internal mobility, right? That's going to go on with the employers, which is going to reduce the amount of external hiring is one of the things I was reading about.
Yeah. And some of these industries may not even recover to the same level. So some industries that we're seeing, I'm sure everybody is seeing at risk. One would be potentially the airliners, right?
Yes.
People aren't traveling for work as much as they used to. I'm sure travel is back, but it's not as critical as it was before because people learned how to do business differently. What does that mean? It means that the cost of travel is going up for everybody, and the businesses now have to be more dependent on luxury travel or leisure travel versus business travel. So that also impacts the hospitality industry, the hotels, Airbnb is down. All over the different industries that support travel, they'll have to make adjustments and they'll have to find the new normal. Do you guys remember during COVID, there was this is the new normal, right? And every year's been unprecedented. So we really can't define what the new normal is going to be for working from home, or traveling for work, or budgets and profitability for small and large companies. They're all seeing a shift, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because, again, I think the one common denominator that we saw with both employees when researching how this is impacting employees versus employers, this market shift, I think on both sides, there's a lot more thoughtful consideration to hiring for the employees. You know, who am I going to work for? What is my value in the marketplace? How do I value myself? That's another thing. I'm here to candidates. Well, I don't even know how to do interviews at this point in time. I don't know what, the market rates are. People are asking for salary ranges now. You talk about salary pay transparency. Thank goodness we have it, because then we can provide that information, because this market's been so up and down. Candidates who are looking for positions are asking that question. What am I valued at right now? That's something that's very important. And then, of course, with employers, they want to make sure that they're bringing people in at the right pay grade, right? Because they don't want to have to adjust later on. And again, they don't want to have to worry about laying people off. So I think the employers are being more thoughtful, more pragmatic about the type of hiring that they're going to do. Trying to forecast better for some of these booms that we are experiencing here over the last however many years. It's been almost 20 years now since the dot-com era started. It was, I think, in 1995. Then the bust happened in 2001. Then we had the real estate boom in 2007. Then the bust in 2008. And now here we are again, right? So people are getting kind of tired of this up and down movement. And so this last one, it was so different because, like you had pointed out too, and I think I even brought it up earlier, we started out flat, right? With people being laid off. And then all of a sudden there was this huge surge to hire. And now 1 year later, it's going down the hill again. So our surge was a lot quicker with this particular boom.
Yeah.
And employers and employees alike are just being more reflective. Again, they're really concerned about job safety and security. They really want to focus on, their career growth and also just stability. Companies, they want to work for companies that are going to be more stable and want to work for companies that are going to be more responsible, about the way that they're hiring. And I think that's going to be a really key issue.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think companies are doing the same. So when I was looking at how companies are reacting to this year, I saw a couple of things, and I saw some differences between large companies and small companies. So the large companies are managing the economic downturn by really being cautious. They're hiring fewer contractors. They're reducing overtime. They're doing more offshoring again. And they're focusing just on their critical programs. They're reducing programs to make sure that their footprint is in a good spot where they can offer their shareholders a profit this year. Smaller companies have other things to worry about, like building a product. And their concerns are a little different. One of the things they're concerned about is the cost of funding this year. With the rise in inflation and the rise in lending costs, now the cost of money has increased incredibly.
So in response to this comment, yes, I noticed here that Boeing actually announced that they are going to move a number of their projects and their staff Well, as a result of their staff being let go, they are going to be contracting out to Tata Consulting Services in India, while other work will be eliminated through streamlining and simplifying processes. And again, this comes, because the cuts come after the company announced several rounds of layoffs during the pandemic due to falling demand, all followed by rapid hiring years. So things that we're talking about.
Another thing that small companies are reacting to, which we haven't seen since 2008, but we're seeing it in a different way, is the scare with the bank shutdowns. So many of the startup companies had their money in the Silicon Valley Bank. And when that bank shut down for a weekend, a lot of companies were trying to figure out where their money was. So they're being a lot more cautious. What are we seeing? What's their reaction to all this? One of the things we're seeing is an increase in contractor hiring, making sure that you have people to do the work, but pausing on your long-term hiring or your full-time hiring and doing the just-in-time hiring, which means that for the full-time staff employees that you plan on keeping, we're seeing small companies fill them as soon as the need is urgent and they want them immediately. The only thing that we're seeing that's different than this is in Silicon Valley, at least, with some of these massive layoffs with these critical skill gaps, they're taking advantage and swiping up some of this great talent, some of the talent in AI, a lot of the data talent, managing cybersecurity, robotics talent, all of the talent that's going to drive them to the future or drive their profitability in the future. They have done what they could to hire as much of that. That's reflected in the recent layoff by J&J in the San Francisco Bay Area. They laid off over 300 people in the robotics divisions. They announced it in March. The layoffs were in mid-April, and now more than half of those people are already reemployed.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. That's good news. And again, too, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, I think that we will see a lot more synergy between employers and employees, trying to match up skills and with the positions that are open and that are, especially when you talk about gaps. As these companies are right-sizing, as they're getting rid of products and services that they realize that their companies don't need or that aren't profitable, and they're cutting back in those areas and letting people go, they can go ahead then and realign some of the talent then and move them into some of these other gap areas where the talent is needed.
That's where we're seeing a lot of the upskilling and the internal promotions. With the layoffs, there's more needs than there are employees right now. So people now have the opportunity to grow their skill sets. And the companies are working to develop them through education, through certifications, through professional development opportunities. So the employees they do have can upskill, and it'll save cost for the organization, but it'll also give the employees more value as they continue to move up in their career. It's a win-win for the employees that remain and the organization. So from an employer perspective, what we're seeing this year in 2023 is their focus on shareholder returns, driving current or future profitability, having a reasonable market share in the industry that they're in. From a human resources perspective, they need to be able to manage their employee base, to focus on their core programs, and be leveraged for future innovation. That's why we're seeing the way they're reacting to the market right now.
All right. That makes sense. In summary, too, I think most employees are concerned about company stability, which I think that based on what you're saying, there's some synchronicity there. Plus, employees are looking for job security. They want the work-life balance and flexibility. And also, they're looking for career growth and advancement. So while these companies are looking to balance themselves in the marketplace, people working for them want to balance their careers as well. And people who are moving internally within their current organizations are looking to, for new positions externally, are going to still be focused on career growth and what their futures in their careers, their professional careers. There you go. And then also too, like you were mentioning a while ago, people are at the same time, I think with both companies and employees, they're being very careful about how to manage salaries, compensation, including benefits, with the rising and falling of the inflation rates, so that people are staying balanced that way, and also making sure that they are staying on top of the different market trends with respect to compensation and benefits, both on the employer side and on the employee side. Don't you agree?
I do.
So, Nancy, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all of the energy and effort that you have put into researching this incredible discussion today. I hope that our followers and our audience will find some interesting takeaways from our podcast. And thank you again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Denise, for having me on. This has been fun. I've learned a lot over the last couple of weeks as we studied this, and I hope that everybody else will have the opportunity to take something away that's meaningful for them.
Thanks, Nancy.
We want to thank you for listening to this episode, and thank you to Nancy Schempf for joining us today. In order to move ahead, it is critical to understand your present. As you progress in your journey, it is vital to stay focused on your goals and adapt as the surroundings change. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Talking TA with Top Source Talent. We hope you found this discussion insightful and informative. As a reminder, our goal is to provide you with the latest insights, tips, and strategies to help you excel as a talent acquisition professional. Whether you're a seasoned recruiter or just starting out, our goal is to provide you with the practical advice that you can apply in your day-to-day work. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to our YouTube page so that you can be notified when new episodes are released. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for listening. We look forward to sharing more valuable insights with you in the future.